Hi, how y'all doing? My name's Tyler. I'm the Vice President of the Winthrop College Republicans.
And I'm Leslie. I'm the Secretary of Affairs here.
And today we have Mr. Tyler Pope, who is the Speaker Pro Tem of the state legislature. So thanks for coming in today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So just to start off, what made you initially decide to run for office?
You know, we don't have but 30 minutes, so if I tell you that one, I won't have to answer any of your other questions. My family were school teachers. My dad was a police officer. He was ultimately sheriff here, and so I always joke with people I was genetically engineered for public service. You know, I grew up in a family that was public service. I went off to college and ended up, contrary to my dad's wishes, excuse me, I ended up being in law enforcement and ultimately went to law school and actually was approached by the solicitor, which was the district attorney up here, about coming back home to prosecute the drug cases. I had worked in narcotics and at SLED at the State Law Enforcement Division and prosecuted drug cases. Well, I came up and talked to him, and really, you know, I'd been in Columbia about 10 years, really didn't have a plan to come home. And I was telling him, here's what you need to do. You need a multi-jurisdictional unit, and you do this, and you do all this different stuff. And he said, yeah, that's what I want you to do. Yeah, that's what I want you to do. So we kind of got to the end of the conversation. He said one thing that really had never crossed my mind. He said, the one thing I would ask is if you take a job with me that you not run against me. That had never crossed my mind. I am very loyal. If you give me a job, I'm not going to run against you. You don't even have to ask me. But so I went back home that weekend, back down to Lexington, and I thought, well, heck, if I'm going to do all the things he wants me to do, maybe I should run. So I was 29 years old, came back home. I went to work at the sheriff's office because I didn't want to do defense work, you know, having always been a prosecutor. And the rest is kind of history. We had the oddest group of friends from high school, you know, some guy that heard me make a speech, two moms from when I played Pee Wee football, you know, just a group, and we ran against the incumbent and we're successful. You know, so that was my prosecution career. And then, of course, after a long prosecution career, I retired, and in 2006, in 2010, when I ran for the House, I said that was a testament to my ability to convince jurors, and that I was able to convince my wife, Kim Pope, to let me run for office yet again. So, again, it's kind of the public servant draw for me, I think.
And speaking on your love for, prosecution and your time with law enforcement, what other issues are important to you in the legislative session?
I think it's been a shift for me in the legislature, because what I didn't want to do when I got there was like just be the criminal laws guy, you know, because I mean, it's what I've done my whole career and I have a lot of knowledge, but I wanted to branch out and understand, you know, the other things that affect us, you know, whether it's education, whether it's taxation, you know, infrastructure, all the things we look at as a state. But I think the core for me, what I liked about being a prosecutor was kind of helping the little guy, kind of helping a victim. And so it's very similar in my law practice now. It's very similar in my legislative service, you know, particularly with the environment you see now in Columbia with the ethical issues we have. I worked on the ethics bills for a long time when I got there. Making it fair for everyone, equally fair. You know, I don't mean communism. I don't mean we don't have a free market opportunity, but making sure that everybody's got an equal opportunity to succeed. I think that's what I enjoy the most. And, you know, when I never want to lose touch with the, you know, 30-something thousand people that sent me, you know, from York and Clover that sent me to Columbia.
So when I first started researching politics and I heard Speaker Pro Tempore, I was like, well, I know what one of those words means. So what exactly? It
was the Latin phrase, of course, that you did, right, yeah.
So what exactly do you do in your job?
The Speaker Pro Tem, or Pro Tempore, is the number two man to the Speaker. I kind of joke because, you know, they always say the Speaker of the House is in South Carolina is, you know, one of the most powerful positions in government. I can assure you there's a sharp decline after the number one guy to the number two guy, but I kind of always joke that I have all the same power as the Speaker, as long as he's like in the restroom or something. You know, his mom was very supportive that day. I said that in my speech a couple years ago, and she pulled me aside and said, "Don't worry, honey, he goes to the bathroom a lot." You know, teasing Jay. But basically, you know, the Speaker presides when we're in session, and so in a pure fundamental role, the Speaker Pro Tem is literally there to stand in the stead of the speaker, primarily in presiding over the session and the flow of business when the speaker would be unavailable for whatever reason. Now, I'm very fortunate with Speaker Jay Lucas that he is inclusive in that, he allows me special assignments. For example, the work I did on the ethics bills the last couple of years. I'm currently working on the tax committee, and it kind of ties back to what you guys said at the beginning. I don't want to drive to Columbia just to be there and say, look at me, I'm a legislator. I want to get to work. And so he's allowed me to do that kind of with special assignments. And so I've enjoyed doing it, and it was just reelected by my peers. You're actually, obviously I'm elected as a House member, and then you're elected again by your peers in the House. And I was elected again this time to serve that capacity.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Speaking other than ethics reform and tax reform, what other issues this session are your main focus?
I think the main focus of the body is really going to be a couple of things. One, we've got to have a permanent funding for infrastructure, for our roads and our ports and all of that. We did a bonding compromise. They always talk about legislature being seeing sausage be made. Once again, last time, the same thing happened a little bit on our ethics bill. You can take a great idea and have it wrapped and in a bow, and suddenly one guy says, well, I don't want that piece. But now the stool's crooked or whatever. So I think infrastructure is going to be a big deal this time. We've got to keep dealing with educational funding from the Abbeville case. And it's important. It's an interesting twist here. For example, for York County, we're very, very blessed with the quality of our public schools. And so we understand as citizens and members of the community, at least I hope we understand, that we need to take care of our poorer school districts. We just want to make sure we don't pull it down to the point that we're going backwards here. Yeah. So what we got to do is figure a funding mechanism that allows us to raise the bar for those poorer schools that don't have maybe the tax base to generate the money they need, but make sure it's not robbing, our faster growing districts like we have here.
Mr. Pope, I've known you for about 2 semesters now. You're a very personable guy, but
my wife may not say so, but I appreciate it.
But one thing we see is, even with Republicans, they have similar goals, but a lot of them disagree on how to reach that goal. And for the longest, in my mind, I think you were the first to actually talk about road infrastructure. From what I can remember, maybe a couple of years ago, you were the first one to bring it up. And you talked about a simple gas tax, strictly just for roads.
Right.
But a lot of people don't see it that way. They may see DOT reform coming before that or something else. How do you speak on that?
Well, a couple of issues. And of course, your real expert will be Gary Simrell, and you can talk roads for him for the full session. But I think one thing we've got to do, and whether it's roads, infrastructure, or anything else, I think is you've got to restore credibility with the citizens and the voters. There is a perception, whether it's actual or perceived, that DOT Department of Transportation waste a tremendous amount of money. So why do I, as a taxpayer, want to give you some more money when you hadn't spent well the money we had? So I think one thing we've got to work on is credibility. Now, the problem is, too, and quite candidly, what drew me to thinking about wanting to be governor sometimes is the argument, like Governor Haley was for it, and then she was against it, and then she's kind of for it, but you're only for it if you have a bigger tax decrease. Well, but you're trying to raise money to fix roads. You know what I mean? It's these moving shells. And I think, again, what we need to do is establish some credibility. When I was solicitor, like I joked earlier, I got elected. We had the worst backlog in the state, the worst criminal case backlog. So I said I didn't know if they thought I was any good or figured I couldn't do any worse than the other guy. We had the worst backlog in the state. But we had a small office. The budget was in shambles. And I worked and worked and worked and built and built and built. If you went back and looked when I was solicitor, there is a decent chance that the budget increased many of the years I was there. People say, well, you're a Republican. That's not supposed to happen. But the backlog went down. And so what the citizens supported, I believe, was they didn't mind giving me more money because they could see something being done with it. And I think that's the thing we have to do, that we probably don't do as good externally is buying the citizens into.
Right.
You know, at some point you get so frustrated because you get peppered with everything online, and you know, one guy's griping about it doesn't even matter if it's true or not, that you finally kind of just shut the door, it seems like, psychologically, and try to work it out. So I've talked to Gary a lot about that. You know, we did for the 400th time change some variation of how the DOT commission is formed, you know, because it's always who's in charge of it and everything. Shuffling that deck to me is not enough. Again, we've got to find good, you know, we love to shout about transparency, but we've got to find real ways to believe and buy into the fact that we have an efficient DOT. You know, if I said, you know, I've been looking at you guys you know, look like you don't feel too good. If I spent the next 30 minutes talking about, oh, you're kind of pale.
Yeah.
You know, by the end of it, I'd have you feeling you might need to go to the doctor or something. Well, it's kind of the same thing. If I keep saying that, you know, it's wasting money doing a horrible job, then that's the filter we put on. So again, I'm not saying it's all perception, but we've got to work hard on that.
Now you mentioned, you know, running for governor a little bit, and you even mentioned it when you went to our rally. But the Trump administration has changed some things with, now we have, you know, Governor Haley will be leaving us, and we also have Congressman Mulvaney who will be leaving us. So there have been some people that have been, you know, asking, like, you know, will you run for governor in 2018? Will you possibly run in the 2017 special election? So what would you say to the people that
It's part of my diabolical plan. I knew you guys had divided loyalty, so I'm just getting everybody moved out of town so y'all can work for me. No, what I've said, and this is what I truly believe, because I was really getting hit with, you know, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? And it seemed like something new was happening every week. You know, I will give you this: Trump is clearly very loyal because he has taken Haley, because I think it's, you know, in recognition of Henry McMaster, you know, supporting him. And so what I said, and we prayerfully considered it, you know, I've been working toward this end for about 2 years, and my wife and I, you know, we believe in the Lord's will. And God's got a plan. That doesn't mean I put on the brakes. It doesn't mean I don't keep working. But what I don't want to be is the guy that wants to be governor at all costs. And so I don't want to be the guy that, what if Henry gets in there and does a great job? Isn't that better for South Carolina than whether Tommy gets elected or not? Now, my supporters are angry because they say, you shouldn't say that, it sounds weak. I said, well, I want to be honest about it. Because the easy thing to say, you know, we were joking coming in, I said, I'm gonna run no matter what, and then I can get a job in Washington. Goes, you know, but so my plan is to keep working toward that goal. But by the same token, and I've told Henry McMaster this, I want to be supportive. I want him to be successful because again, I'm very, very blessed. And if this isn't the course I need to take, you know, something else will be there. But I do enjoy serving, and, you know, maybe I'm supposed to be a House member. Maybe I'm supposed to be Speaker Pro Tem. Maybe I'm supposed to be governor. You know, there's all things in between there. There's Speaker and there's Lieutenant Governor. You know, there's a lot of options. And so I believe if you get too anxious about things, you know, it's the serenity prayer, to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. I'm seeking wisdom all the time.
So people also come up to you about, we were, you know, just the other day, Congressman Mulvaney was picked to be the director of the budget. So have people asked you about that as well?
Yes, and I'm very fortunate. And, you know, of course, you know, I think when the smoke clears, you guys have probably interviewed half the candidates already, or will before the day's over, you know. And for me and my family and my wife, you know, my wife has always been very supportive of me because she sees that, you know, I truly view it like a calling, you know, and but it doesn't mean she particularly cares for politics. She'd rather be up at the house at York with our goats and chickens and all, you know, all the stuff we do. And so it was funny the other night when they kind of, Trump had come out and confirmed the Mulvaney thing, she just out of the blue said, would you want to go to Washington? And that's the closest she's ever got that she would even consider, because I hadn't mentioned it. And the fact that it, you know, it's sometimes like if your parents won't let you do something, then you really think you want to do it just because they won't, you know. so it's kind of like the fact that she asked that, I thought, well, I could entertain it. And for me, I just feel like my service and my family, what I have to give, I can do best here in South Carolina. And, like I say, I overthink things. I overthink about how uptight I get just going back and forth to the airport, much less have to do it twice a week every day. And so, I think there's opportunities here for, my stage in life, where I'm at, where my family's at. So I cannot fathom, anything that would draw me toward going to Washington.
Right. Transitioning to a more that personable side I was speaking on. Tell us something about you that not a lot of people know.
Can't do that, man. I'm in politics. Well, you just Google it. I was thinking about that question. And of course, a number of people know, because I used to tell this story. I used to speak, because of my notoriety, I would often speak at graduations. Now, it was mostly middle school graduations. Elementary school graduation with a graduation up to middle school. But nonetheless, I was a graduation speaker. And Evanport School here in town, I used to tell the story. I grew up out in Leslie, down below Rock Hill in the country. And I used to tell them about learning and being able to adapt and things in life. And I started telling these kids, because I would primarily be speaking to the fifth graders. The parents would be sitting behind them. And I said, when I grew up in Leslie, it was out in the country. It was us country boys and the guys from the Indian reservation. And our coach was an Indian. And I remember him saying, how can you run faster, with your shoes on or without your shoes? Everybody knew the answer to that, man. You can run faster barefoot. So we played pee-wee football, organized pee-wee football barefoot. And I've actually got a picture that it looks like something out of the Bad News Bears, because I was a big boy, and I'm there, with my full uniform on and no shoes on. So I played barefoot pee-wee football. And I did tell those kids at Evanport that, the tough thing was, when we played Evanport, the rich kids in town, their mom and daddy bought them cleats. So playing barefoot against the guys with cleats got a little tricky. So I always said, I'm famous for playing barefoot pee-wee football. Probably the other one was, like I alluded to earlier, we live out in the country, and we kind of, I'd be like the farmer on Green Acres, just kind of dabbling at it, like out there in the suit on my tractor. But we've got goats and chickens, and actually have a donkey, because the donkeys will protect the goats. Kind of herd animals. They call them guard donkeys. But my running joke is that Dennis Moss, representative from over in Cherokee that represents part of York County, he actually had a friend who had a friend who had a friend who helped me get the donkey. And so our running joke is that Dennis and I are half owners in a donkey, and should be reporting that on our ethics report.
That's great. So you're talking a little bit like, talking to younger people. What's your message to younger voters?
Well, you kind of alluded to, the last time I spoke with you guys over, at the event you guys had. I feel strongly, and this really applies to adults too, but thinking for yourself, analyzing for yourself. It's harder and harder and harder, because somebody says, well, I don't have that problem because I only listen to Fox News, or I only listen to this, or, everything seems to be, you're getting fed. I alluded to that night at the campaign rally that it seems like we all watch the debate, and then if you're lucky, you guys as a group may have had a healthy discussion. Most of us just tune in to whatever channel we want to do to see all the talking heads tell us what we just thought we saw. Don't abandon the ability to think for yourself and analyze for yourself. A lot of times we do it, we're like herd animals. We do it because we fear feeling different. It's like you were talking about the Republican politics. If I don't agree with you on some particularly conservative position, then I'm a Republican in name only. I'm a rhino.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I've thought this through, and there's a way to win for everybody.
Right.
I sometimes tease, when somebody's too hardcore to the other side, I said it's, like the torch and pitchfork crowd. Mm-hmm. Burn down the house, burn it. And you realize, oh, wait, that wasn't the right house.
Yeah.
It's a little late. And so I think for young people, one, don't get disengaged either. Again, I'm preaching to the choir because you guys are heavily involved, but you know, it's so easy to just think that somebody else is gonna run the world, and somebody will. And it might not be the people with your value system or your beliefs, and so, you know, and by the time you decide to get engaged, you may look around and, you know, the train's kind of left the station. So that's the thing, I think, that when I see young people involved, and I mean, that's true, whether it's politics, whether it's church, you don't realize how far ahead of the game that you are, by getting involved now versus waiting till you're an adult. I can assure you, when I was your age, you know, one, I didn't go down to Carolina looking for what church I was gonna go to, and I sure wasn't worried about politics, you know, and so I think, that's the thing that you have to encourage people, but it is harder, I think, in this world because of all the information. You know, it goes back to my joke about making you feel like you're sick.
Yeah.
You know, if I can tell you, you're not involved in this, you're not involved in that. Of course, my wife came back to Winthrop and finished a social work degree. You know, I always joke, a Republican trial lawyer and a Republican social worker. We got all the markets cornered. But needless to say, you guys being conservative in a somewhat liberal environment, you guys are already practicing what I'm preaching right now, I think.
Well, thank you so much for coming out today. We hope you have a great session this year.
Thank you, guys. I
Thank you.
appreciate you for having me.
Yes, sir.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir.